Hey, this is a sermon for Rosh Hashanah 2023, 5784. There are two key events in Jewish history and two places that help define them, according to the late philosopher David Hartman. There's Sinai, the moment and the place where the Jewish people, the burden of slavery newly lifted, received our mission to be a covenanted people and to use our newfound freedom to build a better, more holy, more just world. Sinai, the moment, or the memory of it, is quite literally what brings us here today, or any day. The charge to imbue our lives with sacred moments and actions and to build a more godly world infused this people, our people, the Jewish people, for millennia. The other definitive event, the other definitive place, said Hartman, is Auschwitz. The still hard to comprehend extent of the apparatus of murder leaves a mark as indelible on our collective souls as the majesty of the memory of when humanity met the divine in a legendary moment in the wilderness, the mountain of God and the pit of despair, leveling each other out into a flattened, modern malaise. So this spring I visited Auschwitz. I took part in the March of the Living. It's a trip for Jews from around the world, from Buenos Aires and Beersheba and Berlin, Bridgewater. It brings us all together, 12,000 strong, to Poland on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, and on Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel's 75th birthday this year, we spent in Jerusalem. And we walked from Auschwitz I, which began as a POW camp and a labor camp, the 3 kilometers from Auschwitz I to Auschwitz II, Birkenau, which was the extermination camp, where the vast majority of the industrial slaughter took place. And the idea is that it's a march of the living, an assertion of purpose in the face of the death marches, when in the waning months of the war, the Germans evacuated the camps in front of the Red Army's advance, and they took the malnourished, traumatized, surviving skeletal prisoners, the Germans did, and marched them away from the front lines, dressed in rags and maybe wooden shoes through the snowy, harsh Polish winter. For grimly obvious reasons, these became known as death marches. The counterpoint is to annually do a March of the Living. So I was there with a handful of folks, mainly high school students from our shul, and I've dedicated my life, of course, to Sinai, to the idea that human lives aren't accidental, and that we matter, and we're here to help each other build lives of purpose and meaning, and yet, standing in Auschwitz, I understand the pull of that other pull, the pull of the abyss. So at the end of the march, our insightful guide, Dr. Gila Oren, looked at me and said with her thick Israeli accent, she says, "Rabbi, you look around and you see 12,000 people, Jews from all over the world, and how inspiring it all is. But me, I only think in terms of the numbers. 12,000 Jews. When this place was operating at full capacity, they murdered 12,000 in 90 minutes. Everyone you see would have been dead, and they could clear the space and be ready for the next group before lunch. Everyone you see, Rabbi. It's a fraction of what happened in this space every day, year after year." So that's where Western civilization took us, right down that famous rail spur to oblivion, and it can't be ignored. The promise of divine protection of Sinai died at the gates of Auschwitz. So did the promise that secular Western thought would liberate us. Later in that same trip in Israel, in a lovely hostel courtyard on the banks of the Sea of Galilee, might seem small next to the enormity of the German crime, I feel a call from a shul parent about anti-Semitism in the schools here. Every year I take more calls, have more conversations dealing with anti-Semitism than I did the year before. Every year, the incidents seem to grow more frequent and worse. I hear it from kids in different districts, all schools, all levels. Kids harassed online, in halls, pushed into playing along. Not just blaming Jewish kids for Israeli government policies, though that takes place too. Not just penny throwing, though that too. Not just Hitler should have finished the job, though that too. Kids will tease each other, I know. I was guilty of teasing peers back in the day. But we know the cost of bigotry against any group. You don't have to go to Poland to know how bigoted ideas metastasize. American bigoted laws and ideas of the 20s and 30s provide the inspiration for the masterminds of Auschwitz. Kids are spreading this sort of bigotry, and adults are as well. We saw it with the NBA's Kyrie Irving, Ye/Kanye, who's got powerful friends. And Elon Musk this month blame the ADL for fomenting anti-Semitism. Blaming the victim is straight out of the bigots' playbook. When this stuff is acceptable enough to be on the thumbs of the world's richest man, the acceptability of hate is transformed. And already the FBI says that Jews, who make up 2.4% of the US population, are the targets of more than 55% of all religious hate in this country. Times are changing, and we have to change to ensure our society does not pull itself apart. And by the way, it's not that I fear that German history will be repeated in the US. We're a different society, and there's not broad enough us versus them dynamic here, where the Jews are as a group the them, for that to happen. But I do think that it's difficult to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, as our founders attempted. Democracies are both resilient and fragile. The processes that led to the Shoah had many, many antecedents along the way. And we know it didn't start with gas chambers. It did not start with a hail of bullets. It started with words, scapegoating, blaming, playing on grievances, and feelings of victimization and humiliations, dehumanization, us versus them, weakening trust in institutions, sowing distrust in institutions, and especially conspiracy theorizing. Anti-Semitism at its base is often a conspiracy theory, right? Where people believe that the Jews are in charge of global finance or the government or the media. Conspiracy theories are an easy way to shift blame from oneself to somebody else. And that is endemic in our society. All of these things, as you know, are common across our polarized society. And all of these dangerous trends are encouraged explicitly or implicitly by the polarized political environment we live in. All are encouraged explicitly or implicitly by the polarized media environment we live in. All are encouraged explicitly or implicitly by the polarized social media environment we live in. All encouraged explicitly or implicitly by a culture that asks first and last, what's in it for me? Where image and amusement and escapism continue to encroach on the space and time needed to cultivate the eternal, the quiet sense of connection to the one who gives life meaning, who gives us life, who sustains us, and who brings us to this moment. We live in a time when we can easily fall into a binary trap, dividing the world into good and evil. We're good, they're bad. My side loves humanity, they're authoritarian-loving fascists. My side loves this country, their side are anti-American, anti-police neo-Bolsheviks. On differences with a whole host of issues, we see maliciousness rather than a difference of opinion. Blue zip codes get bluer, red zip codes get redder. Algorithms keep feeding us stories designed to stroke our egos, guaranteed not to challenge us. I'm getting interrupted. Where was I here? That was close. Our phone feeds provide us caricatures of others, cherry-picking facts to maximize anger, and we wonder then, what's gone wrong? Monocultures are unhealthy. The Jewish tradition is one of debate, of challenging our own assumptions, of legitimately examining our opponent's arguments, of living side by side with those with whom we disagree. Thousands of years of being an often barely tolerated minority taught us to live with others. Why is the Torah rife with violent episodes and commands right alongside essential mitzvot like v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, v'ahavta et hager, love the stranger, v'ahavta et Adonai, love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all that is yours. Don't hate each other in your hearts. Don't hate the Egyptian, for you were a stranger in their land. Yes, it ended badly, but when the children of Israel suffered a famine in the time of Joseph, they took you in and fed you, and you're falling short if you forget the good. Why does the Torah have such extremes? Because a small handful of Nazi or Al-Qaeda sympathizers aside, the Torah teaches the truth said by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Solzhenitsyn was a political dissident, sent to the Gulag by the Soviet regime, Orthodox Christian. He was tortured within an inch of his life. And he later wrote, "It was only when I lay there on the rotting prison straw I sensed within myself the first stirrings of good. Gradually it was disclosed to me that the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart, and through all human hearts. This line shifts, Inside us, it oscillates with the years. Even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained. And even in the best of all hearts, there remains a small corner of evil. Solzhenitsyn knew that evil results not just from evil people. The line separating good and evil passes right through every human heart. It just takes thoughtlessness, a cutting, bigoted remark, maybe eliciting a laugh, maybe solidifying one's superior place in the social hierarchy. What does it take to make a person a bigot? The sexist glance, the anti-Semitic statement, the silent racist decision, the unspoken gay shaming. All you have to do is for a split second not see the other as human as you, not as worthy as you, as flawed as you. One moment of thoughtlessness can dominate our destiny. The line separating good and evil passes right through every human heart. Yours and mine. I know there's no proof for a revelation at Mount Sinai, but it's not a conspiracy. It's supposed to be the opposite of shifting blame. Hartman, I said it at the beginning, writes, the model of Mount Sinai awakens the Jewish people to the awesome responsibility of becoming a holy people. At Sinai, we discover the absolute demand of God. We discover who we are by what we do. Sinai calls us to action, to moral awakening, to living constantly with the challenges of building a moral and just society which mirrors the kingdom of God in history. Sinai creates humility and openness to the demands of self-transcendence. That's how we fight the rise of hate and small-mindedness, of reaction and anger. Embrace the best parts of the Jewish tradition and gain perspective. Hartman says the centrality of mitzvah in Judaism shatters egocentricity and demands of the Jew that he judge himself by the way he acts, and not by mystical myths regarding the purity and uniqueness of the Jewish soul. Meaning, don't think that you're naturally superior. You are not. Na'aseh v'nishma was the response of our people at Sinai. We will do and we will understand. We understand ourselves through our doing. It's not the quality of your intentions that count. It's the quality of your actions. To believe that there's a purpose in life, to stand up to those who would welcome Jews only so long as they're not too Jewish, as long as they conform, as long as they're not embarrassing, not out of step. To the contrary, Judaism teaches us to be out of step. You should be out of step. And maybe I'll disagree with you, but we can be in covenant and disagree. And that's part of the Torah we need to bring to a society on the brink. Mount Sinai is meant to help us transcend the everyday, the self-centeredness, the interest-based transactional way of living, to know that there are laws greater than the laws of the marketplace, that we are more than products. Learn, daven, practice, show up, volunteer, find ways to build community. Jews have not only survived, but influenced history by maintaining a sense of obligation to transcendent ideas. Why is so much online life a sewer of intolerance and insult? Why are services slow and boring? One question answers the other. To cultivate a soul, we need time to think. Neither you nor I evolved to function well in the lightning-fast, overstimulated digital universe. We need time to think, to address ultimate questions, because the line between good and evil runs through every human heart. Each of our hearts. Educated people with nice university degrees kissed their spouses, smiled at their children, and walked off to work in the factories of mechanized human slaughter, which teaches all the education in the universe will not make you a good person. Universities will not save us. That is not what they're designed to do. Do not make them your God. All the memes of kindness will not save us. Empty faith will not save us. Zealous devotion will not save us. It is only careful cultivation of our moral selves, a recognition of the needs of our souls and the souls of those close to us, that will allow us to know the infinite value of the souls most distant from us. It is easy to embrace those you approve of, harder to extend the same kindness to those you disagree with. Yet that is our task. In Poland, you also went to Treblinka. Auschwitz-Birkenau is on the edge of a small town, Oswiecim, not far from Krakow, a major city. Treblinka is far from any towns. Gila told us that it was a camp without a camp, and so it was. Birkenau is barracks as far as the eye can see in every direction. Treblinka had just enough for a bare staff. There was no labor, no selection. Everyone who arrived was already condemned. It was in the middle of nowhere, the Nazis knowing that this merited hiding. And the Soviet army didn't liberate it. The Germans shut it down themselves. The Nazis had already achieved their goal of murdering all the Jews in the area. They also went to Majdanek, an extermination camp on the edge of Lublin. It's a city where they wanted people to know what happened if they got out of line, so it was close to the city. Here, preserved by the Soviets, was a mountain of human ash, preserved as a memorial to all those killed. We stood alongside it and chanted El Malay Rachamim. We said Kaddish. It was all we could do, and it wasn't enough. The Soviet-era monument over this horrific site says, "Let our fate be a warning to you." Auschwitz and Sinai, the line between good and evil that runs through every human heart. Our choices are our own. We can help create the kind of culture we want. Want to face down anti-Semitism before it metastasizes? Cultivate a resilient, caring soul and do so with your children and friends as well. Don't give your eyeballs or your money, your attention to those whose business model profits off of spreading hate. Be a proud member of this community. Jews can be proud without irony. Those here who aren't Jewish, but share love and connection with someone Jewish, I and we deeply appreciate your presence and your love. And we know that we stand together to save our society from a wrong turn. Our central command is to listen, Shema, and to listen to each other, to differences, to understand that we all share a common history and a common fate despite our differences, and to avoid the temptation that skip the scales to darkness. We sing at the end of today's davening the peppy little tune Hayom. Translated, it says, strengthen us today, inscribe us for a good life today, listen to our plea today, sustain us with the power of divine righteousness today. Each of us has the power to share that hope, the tikvah, that sustained our people throughout thousands of years, that we're bound to build better futures with our full hearts, belev shalem. But we can do so only when we're grounded enough and dedicated enough to make good choices. No less than those who came before us. We live in times that force us to look to the heights of Sinai, the mountain of God, or into the abyss of the machinery of death. We can know the risks and train ourselves to climb higher and to choose life. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova Tikatevu. May we all be inscribed with a year of peace and hope and justice.